Finance Committee meeting. It's been a while before we, since we've gotten together. So Jen, welcome to our meeting. Kenneth, Mr. Pacheco, I believe that's probably you that says Kenneth. And Chris, how are you?
Fine, Ed, how are you?
Good. A while before we, so, all right, so I guess preliminary announcements that the meeting is on Zoom and is being telecast via the town's YouTube channel and being recorded for the Town of Dayton YouTube channel. I will open the meeting, call the meeting to order. I don't know, Brett, since this is really like the first open Zoom, how do you guys handle the Pledge of Allegiance? I don't have a flag or.
It is awkward, but we are all patriots and we just grin and bear it. We
Okay,
just
no,
literally
I just wanted, I don't have a flag anywhere, so I just wanted.
That's okay.
So there we
I got one.
The flag in the sky.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
And
and
justice
justice for all.
Thank you all. So the first item, which is normal for the fall, is for the committee to reorganize. So I will turn the meeting over to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, who handles the duties of the appointment of our chairman and the vote on our clerk.
Thank you, sir. With that, just one piece of business. If you are not speaking, do you mind just muting yourself? There's a little bit of background noise. Thank you so much. With that, I will declare all positions vacant, meaning chairman and clerk of the Finance Committee. And at this time, I will entertain motions for a chairman of the Finance Committee. Excuse me, for a chairperson of the Finance Committee.
Nominate Ed Swartz.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for Mr. Swartz. Do we have any further nominations? Hearing none. All those in favor for Mr. Ed Swartz to be chairman of the Finance Committee, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Congratulations, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Chairman Zagrafis. So I will open nominations for, thank you for allowing me to do this again and continue as a chairman. I truly enjoy it. Even though I'm not physically in the community, I still truly have a passion for the town of Dayton. So I will open nominations for a clerk, and I'm going to ask Mr. Roach if he'll do it in the interim during the time frame that until we appoint some additional members. So I will step down and make a motion for Peter Roach as clerk, interim clerk of the Finance Committee.
Second.
Will you accept, Mr. Roach?
Interim.
Okay. Motion made and seconded. On discussion, hearing none, all those in favor, all those opposed, the ayes have it. So thank you for that, Mr. Roach. Which leads us to the next item is approval of the minutes of, I don't have the date in front of me. I opened the minutes out. What was the date on those minutes that you emailed out, Pete?
July 9th.
Of the meeting of July 9th.
Dr. Z, excuse me, Ed. Dr.
Yep.
Z,
Yes?
roll call votes because everyone's zooming.
You are correct. Per the
Oh, okay.
so just to back up the wagon, if you don't mind, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
no problem.
Can we have a Finance Committee roll call vote on the ayes or yays for Mr. Swartz's chair?
So if you say Peter Roach, aye, that's what you do. You got to say who you are and you vote.
Peter,
Perry, aye.
Was that a Kevin Perry aye? I saw
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And Robert Rendon, aye.
Thank you. And this is for, I think Mrs. Brady is going to assist with the minutes. So this is also for her assistance as well. Thank you, gentlemen.
And Ed Swartz, I'll step down and vote aye for myself because I make a quorum of the committee. So everyone has to vote in order for us to So I will step down and vote for myself.
Thank you, sir.
And then on in the interim clerk spot, I would, Chairman stepping down, I vote Peter Roach. Kevin?
Second.
No, I just announce your vote for Peter Roach.
Oh, I'm sorry. Peter Roach, Kevin. It's Kevin, Peter Roach.
Robert?
Robert Rendon, yes for Peter Roach.
Peter Roach?
Yes.
Thanks, Nancy. Thanks for bringing that up. So moving on, I would accept a motion for the approval of the minutes. Is there a second? Is there a motion? Motion and
Motion to accept the minutes.
Yes.
is there a second?
Second.
On a roll call vote, Robert?
Robert Rendon, aye.
Peter Roach?
Aye.
Kevin Perry?
Kevin Perry, aye.
Ed Swartz, aye. Thank you. Correspondence, I didn't find anything in the file. Under old business, I didn't see an email come out, but I did ask the selectman's office to forward a PDF with all the information of any person who has shown interest in joining the finance committee, to get that into the hands of the committee members. And once we have that, we will schedule a meeting to, i.e. do interviews and appoint additional members, because we would like to fill out the committee as soon as possible to at least get a couple more members so we can start to build the committee to capacity. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
that was under old business. New business, to review the articles for special town meeting warrant. Brett, can you share your screen? Do you have control?
Give me just a moment to bring up the packet. 1 second. And then I can share on my screen.
Perfect. You guys all got your copies, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for being
I
patient.
should step back to correspondence a little bit before we start this. And Chris, I'm going to ask you to step in at a certain point on this also. So before we start the warrant, while Brett's bringing it up, we do not have free cash certified as of today. The submissions are in. And Chris, I think I forwarded it out to everyone. Chris did prepare an example, but what was submitted and what our expectation currently is. It's not final till it's final, but usually it's pretty good unless we think there's some big discrepancy, but we don't believe, as we haven't had any in the last 20 years, that free cash will be certified somewhere between 1.5 million and 1.8 million. And the difference between that is what we will get for reimbursements and what we won't get for reimbursements before the certification. And Chris, correct me if that's the process on that.
That's correct, Ed. Right now, there were several deficits that I had identified, meaning that there were reimbursements due either from the Commonwealth or from other governmental agencies as of June 30th. Typically what happens is the Department of Revenue will hold us harmless for anything that gets reimbursed between July 1st and September 30th, assuming that we got reimbursement before I submitted the balance sheet. What I can tell you is this: the biggest reimbursement that we were waiting for was Chapter 90 reimbursement. Tom Ferry actually applied for that reimbursement actually before I even submitted the balance sheet, and we have received money subsequent to September 30th. So I expect the state, when they do their certification, to relieve us of that burden on free cash and actually bump up the free cash closer to 1.7 million.
Okay. So, but for this exercise, we are going to assume that none of those have been reimbursed. So at worst case, it will remain as part of free cash if we've already, once we get through the certification hearing, the tax certification hearing. So what we have in front of us, we will base on if we were going to get 1.5 million
Perfect.
back, because we want to be conservative with what we utilize. So does anybody have any questions on that? From the information that was sent out, it's pretty self-explanatory in that general fund free cash box, everything in yellow, which totals about $309,000, about $309,000 are all reimbursements. And the rest is just an outstanding debt of police details that is still yet to be collected, that would go into, that were from last year, but would just revert back into free cash for the end of, or revenue for this current fiscal year. So,
Mr. Chairman, are you able to see the warrant now?
I am. Does
Okay.
everyone
Thank
else
you, sir.
see it?
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you, Brett. So, Chris, I do have one other question before we go through this, and I had mentioned this earlier today, that the first page of the Google Doc, which I don't have the Google Doc in front of me, has that been updated totally to reflect everything of where we are today, so we know where we are to the levy limit?
No, it has not, Ed.
So, as we came out of, so it doesn't have what the new reimbursement level from the state, or it does have the projected revenues in it, so we know where we are to the levy limit. So do you know, going into fall town meeting, where are we to the levy limit?
I do not, but I will have that information for you and for the committee on Monday.
Okay. That will, we may have to meet one more time on recommendations based on that, but at least we can get the bulk of the review done now, and we'll meet one more time on finalized recommendations. We could have tentative recommendations tonight, but some of what's in here we may want to look at as raise and appropriates, because they could be some recurring charges. So,
Ed, question?
sure, Nance.
When we went into the annual town meeting, does anybody remember where we were as far as the levy limit? I know we were under.
Peter, you're usually pretty good at that.
I don't have those notes in front.
Yeah, I gotta. I'm gonna see if I can pull
I was
up.
thinking like 200,000 below.
I think you're right, Nancy. Somewhere in that
Somewhere.
range, 150 to 130 to 180, somewhere in that range. So we'll
Okay.
get that together for within the next week.
Okay.
But because there are some also, I just forwarded out an email that I received from Mr. Kitchen. And Nancy, thank you for the heads up email on the schools, that even though we had a number that they agreed to us going into town meeting, they have not adjusted the budget or the assessment, and they have new updated minimum contributions, and that they have really not had a discussion with us. I shared with him today that they need to send those over to us, but that we have already prepared our warrant for town meeting, for special town meeting, as well as which will lead us to our tax rate classification hearings, and that this is not the time to be trying to change our budget. That, having a discussion with us about it would have been more clarity, that they can't just throw it on us. And, we can't wait until DESI decides in December, because Rehoboth's not having their first town meeting until after the December 1st deadline. That's the number that we've given them. That's the number that the school committee has to live with. That's the number that the townspeople voted on. So I said, send us all the information, but I don't believe anything will change from where we're at now, unless we are forced to do something in the fall based on how DESI comes in and sets the budget in December. So, they were aligned and they knew where we voted. They chose not to change their budget for some unknown reason, even though the Tuesday before we went to town meeting, I went to their meeting and said, okay, school committee, are we all aligned with this number? And they all nodded yes. And they all nodded yes and said yes. So that's the update, but everyone should have that information. I sent it. Go ahead, Nancy.
Ed, and that was why I asked you about where we were with the levy limit, because I didn't think we had reduced the school department budget by 260,000. And I was thinking, are they trying to figure we had money, we had space in the levy limit, and they're, I don't know, trying to reach that. I don't know.
No, it's 160, and Nancy, the 250 comes from 160 is what the agreed upon reduction was from us going into town meeting that they were aligned with and the superintendent was aligned with. And the other 80,000 comes from an increase in our minimum contribution.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Just one other thing, and I had mentioned that the petition was approved in Rehoboth. I guess they got enough signatures to take the K-8s out of the region. That is not going to be on their December meeting because of COVID. They don't have a venue big enough. So
Yeah.
it's coming up sometime, but it's not going to be on the December meeting. I don't know where they're meeting either. Maybe it's the school, but
Yeah,
whatever.
I don't know. So, all right, so let's get into the warrant. And we will go in order, and then if we want to hold any, and I know that Jim Aguirre is here to cover for Mr. Ferry on a couple of the articles, and Park and Rec is available. I think I saw Mr. Rosa, and I believe Mr. Rhines is here. If someone wants to speak on any of the specific articles, just let me know. Either via a quick chat note to Brett or just ask to be recognized. Some people have pictures, some don't. So it's easy to see somebody when they have the hand up, but.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Brett.
while I'm sharing my screen, I'm not able to view the chat. So
Okay.
I'm just letting you know that.
Okay, so if someone wants to speak, just speak up and I'll recognize you. I won't take any offense to somebody jumping into the middle of the meeting. So, all right, so let's just jump. I don't believe there are any prior year bills that I know of. Selectmen, if you know of any, I didn't see any in the folder. Chris, were there any prior year bills?
No prior year bills that were presented to me.
Okay, thank you. The first, Article 3 is written the way that it's needed to be written to fund. This will be the third year I think we've done this. So I would ask that the Finance Committee go on record recommending a transfer from free cash in the amount of $391,425 to for the payment of the bond on the police station. Because it's voted as a raise and appropriated annual, it is technically a reduction to the tax rate. So that's why it's worded that way. So the Finance Committee want to go on record in recommending that?
Peter Roach, so moved.
Robert Rendon, second.
Second, motion made and seconded. I'll call the name and you just say yay or nay. Peter Roach?
Yay.
Robert Rendon?
Yay.
Kevin Perry?
Yay.
Ed Swartz, yay. Article 4 is to see if the town will vote to authorize total expenditures of $51,088 to be raised and appropriated and transferred to the following accounts. So I'm assuming that these are shortfalls from the recommendations at annual town meeting. So I don't know if the selectmen want to touch on this, or Chris, you want to touch on I understand the elections one, the additional expenses to the elections, and the additional town meetings. If someone wants to touch on why we have another 12,000 in waste collection, I thought we cleaned all that up at annual and at the prior to annual, and what the additional highway expenses are and conservation. Someone want to touch on that?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I believe the Conservation Commission request and the highway request with a correct mathematical errors in the budget back in June. This is to get us to what the numbers were supposed to be based on what was presented in the article, but not in the total. So when we voted the total, there was a math error in a couple of those numbers, and this is just to correct effectively the math now on those two budgets. That's my recollection right now.
And these are, since they're under personnel expenses, I assume they're salary adjustments?
Actually, they may be benefit adjustments, I think, in one instance. The highway department is getting a communications allowance, I believe it is, for the staff. And I believe that's part of what that number is there. The rest of it, I'm not certain of.
So some of that is so on the highway one, that is to address something from a union negotiation?
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, they had to, I think they have a provision in their contract for communications allowance. I think that's what that's to correct. I did not research this, unfortunately, before tonight's meeting. So I apologize to all of you for that. That's my recollection right now.
Okay. On the expenses one, could someone from the Board of Selectmen explain the additional 15,000?
Mr. Chairman, and Selectman Goulart, Selectman Pacheco, please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe we expended money from our P&T account, and this is to replenish that.
Is that where the funds for the personnel search for a new town administrator is coming from?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And then Chris, do you know anything, or no one's from the Board of Health is here, right? To understand why we have an additional already
No,
$13,000 in waste collection?
It can't have anything to do with the existing contract. I mean, the Board of Health was very good in making sure that the number that was voted on in May was in agreement with the contract. So this is something new in their budget. I don't know if they're making an adjustment for an addition. I don't know if they're looking for extra money for
Mr. Chairman,
hazardous waste day.
Mr. Chairman,
Chairman
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interject. I think we had discussed this either 2 or 3 Board of Selectmen's meetings ago. This was actually a special article request by the Board of Health. Recycling costs have increased. More people are recycling. It is more expensive for us to safely dispose of that recycling than it is for that to be included in waste. That is what the $12,666.70 is for. As I recall, it was moved from its own independent special article into Article 4. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so I'm assuming it will become part of their baseline budget for next year?
That is our hope, and that is what the Board of Selectmen, in consultation with the Finance Committee, has expressed to them.
Okay. Okay.
We heard you loud and clear, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Any questions on and I'm assuming tuition is because we have additional employees through contractual agreements that will be taking advantage of tuition reimbursements?
That is correct. And we've had increased interest from the fire department, which is fantastic.
Okay. All right. Any questions on those? So unfortunately, since we don't know exactly what our levy space is, I would recommend that we raise and appropriate these because they will be part of the baseline budget. But until we have an actual figure on that, I don't want to make a recommendation. Does anyone else have a differing opinion on that? Okay. So we will hold that until we'll schedule another meeting between now and special. Article 5. Is there a recommendation from the Sewer Commission on this article? Does anyone? This is the contract. Oh, this is the contract, but only a portion of it comes from sewer retained earnings. That's why it's in there.
That's correct.
So I would say this is another one that we should hold until we see what we have from a appropriation standpoint, because this will be all recurring. I asked the Board of Selectmen this question first. Are there any what are the one-time payments out of here? And what would be considered, think of the word, paying for previous, when did this contract expire that we're?
That was July 1st, so June 30th.
Oh, so it's all new for this year. So all of these expenditures in this year would be FY21 expenditures, not something that goes back to FY20.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pacheco. So I would again on this one ask we hold off until we find out where we are on the levy limit, because these will be a recurring expense and should be part of the baseline budget. Any thoughts on that? Any questions? Okay. Article 6, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer from available funds $30,000 to fund FY21 personnel expense for the hiring of a conservation agent. So,
Mr. Chairman, did you want me to say a little blurb on this?
sure.
Selectman Goulart, if I missed anything, please feel free to chime in. Mr.
Okay.
Mello has been our go-to person with conservation. He has done a lot for us, and we got him at quite a bargain for many years. He is either retiring or has already retired, and that is why this is on the agenda. We need someone who can do the job, someone who can fill his shoes per se. And so we're in a bit of a bind in terms of the timing of when this all happened. And so that's why this is on the agenda. But the Board of Selectmen did agree and vote on this unanimously, understanding the pressure and the timing of everything that has occurred, meaning the retirement. So we want to thank Mr. Mello, but we do see the value in this position. And so that's why this is on the warrant for the special town meeting.
Mr.
Nancy?
Swartz?
Yep.
All right, so this goes back to when you and I first came on the finance committee. We had a conservation agent. She was excellent, and she left. And that's when Mr. Mello took over.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to
Yeah.
fill in until we got somebody. He's filled in all of this time.
A long time.
So when the Board of Selectmen discussed this, because the chairman of the Concom said, we need somebody, it's really a reinstatement. We aren't creating a new position. We're finally recognizing Charlie can't do it anymore. So the Board of Selectmen approved it, and we have a job description that was revised, and we're going to be seeking a conservation agent. And when we discussed this with the town administrator, and Mr. Pacheco, correct me if I'm wrong, it's $30 an hour, 25 hours a week?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay,
And Selectman Goulart, we're referring to this as a reactivation of the position
Exactly,
that went
yeah.
dormant.
or a reinstatement, because it's not being created for the first time.
Any questions from the committee?
My only question is this is a prorated amount just for the remainder of this year? And at next, so for next year, we'll be having to fund more?
It'll be a budget item next year.
Yeah, okay.
But to answer your question, and again, I can't see who's speaking. I think that's Mr. Rendon. Yes, for this,
Yes.
6 months or 5 months, yes. For the remainder of FY20.
Okay.
For this year, excuse me.
52 weeks at the 30 at 25 is 39.
Yep. So in reality for this year, we don't need the full 30, because for by the time we have town meeting and we put this in place, you're talking December, January.
Well, if we can get her in December or sooner, because there's work that there are
if
inspections
we
that
get-
need to be done, but
If we got it in December, it would be about $23,000. This is another one. I need to see what we have left in the levy limit.
Mhm.
We may not be able to do the whole 30. We may need that $7,000 to stay below the
Sure.
levy limit. So I think you have the commitment that we're going to support putting it in place.
Mhm.
It's just figuring out the funding for it.
And
We
that's
understand.
that's 40 weeks, and we're already at what 36 left in the year, roughly.
Yeah. Yeah, so I figured it out at 7 months was $22,750.
But there's also benefits too that we have to pay.
Not at 30 hours, we don't, do we?
yes, you
Yes.
do it at 20.
Anything after 19, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay.
But we
Yep.
understand, Mr. Chairman, this is Brett, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We do understand that the $7,000 may matter, so we do respect and appreciate your consideration. I know you know how important this position is and how we got a bargain in Mr. Mello for the years that we had him, so we do appreciate that, Mr. Chairman.
I have a question too, also, that someone can answer is, did not the Board of Health say they had some funding that was in their budget that they were paying to the Conservation Commission?
I believe that was for perk tests. Selectman Goulart, did you want to comment?
It wasn't for personnel, I know that.
Okay. Okay. I was trying to think back because I know it was a big deal that Mr. Pius made in his budget presentation about that they had budgeted monies for, that they were paying to the Conservation Commission. So, okay. So
I
that's
think that
another-
was for something specific, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
that's all.
okay, that's another one that we'll
No worries.
we'll hold. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Article 7, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and transfer from available sums $85,000 to be expended by the Board of Selectmen for engineering services to redo the driveway and traffic pattern. And I know that Mr. Aguirre, Commissioner Aguirre is here to represent himself and Mr. Ferry, who have done some work on this project. So if you just want to fill us in on where that project's at, Jim, if you're here. Hold on, let me text him because he told me he was here. So as everyone knows, 'cause I actually went to the Board of Selectmen meeting for a little while last night just to listen to their discussion through this. And this is the project that's been talked about for a couple of years now.
Yes.
Yes, quite a while.
Yeah, so it's at least getting the engineering part of it. I know I think the surveying part's been done.
Yes, and they had a and I'm not going to speak for the building commissioner, but they did do a whole map with a rendering of the reconstruction. I know Mr. Ferry and an engineer or some sort of surveyor was part of that. And they presented it to the Board of Selectmen probably before the summer started, maybe even before that. So this has been quite a while in the making.
All right, so I don't know what happened to Mr. Aguirre, but does anyone have any questions that in regards to this that maybe the selectmen can answer, or because I know they've been fully involved in this?
If I may,
Sure, Nancy.
we discussed this early in the calendar year a number of times. As we even discussed it before January of this year. The goal we had hoped to achieve would be that we would have in place for the opening of school in September. So obviously this discussion took place before COVID-19 hit. But what we had hoped to do was to be able to have a more, a safer method to get children into the schools with all of the traffic and the buses and everything else. And Jim and Tommy looked at this. They had suggestions. It was clear it was going to take more than what they had suggested. And we talked about a study. Well, in the meantime, of course, in March, we got hit with COVID and everything relative to schools and all of that. And everything else sort of got put on hold. But this has been talked about, I'm saying going on close to 2 years. And this all, I believe, all is focused on doing something to make a safer environment at the present schools because of traffic patterns, buses, parents picking up children, dropping off. Because the one after this is separate and distinct, okay? So we have a problem at the schools right now with traffic. We've had police officers there and everything else. So that's what they're trying to address with this particular study, and that's what this money is for.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I can't admit people when I'm sharing my screen. I did let Building Commissioner Aguirre in. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen now.
That's fine. Thanks, Jim. I didn't know what you meant when you said you were on hold. I just thought you were waiting. I didn't know
My
you were
apologies.
you were sitting out there waiting. So, Jim, we were just talking about Article 7 and the progress on what the funds for the engineering services mean to the project on that the driveway project. Must be on mute.
It takes a second. I just admitted him. It takes a second for the audio to connect. It may just take him a moment.
Okay.
Is he muted on the lower right corner?
Yeah, he is. That's what I'm texting him and telling him he's on mute.
He has to *6, I believe, is what you do on a telephone.
Yes.
*6, Mr. Commissioner.
There we go.
All right. God, I'm like a caged
My
animal.
apologies.
Hello, everyone.
Hey,
Hi, Jim. So Jim, if you just want to fill us in on the progress of the project on the elementary, middle school driveway and what the expenditure is expected for?
Sure. If I don't need to go into why the project is needed, I can if need be. But the project itself requires the reconfiguration of most of the parking areas and most importantly, the 3 entrances and exits. I said 3 because there's an additional one that will be proposed. And this is because of the stacking issue that we have at the light. I think that's caused by 2 things. One is the increase in residents that we have and the traffic increase. And then the other obviously is with the parents dropping off the kids, which has increased exponentially over the last few years. As I understand it, it's gone up even significantly higher since the pandemic. So that said, it's a fairly involved project. It requires several wetlands crossings. There are 2, I believe, for the new entrance, which is going to be located over by the power lines and the baseball fields. And then there's a vernal pool on an adjacent property that will impact an expanded parking area, which is going to be in the newly acquired property that we bought several years ago, where we took the house down. So the engineering firm that we've engaged with, I've worked with before. They're extremely competent. The money is for the entire project, engineering start to finish, and does include a drone flyover and all of the wetlands approvals that are required. They'll be actually taking those to the Concom for the town. I yield.
Okay. Any questions for Building Commissioner Aguirre on this? So I would recommend that we transfer 85,000 from free cash for the driveway and traffic pattern at the elementary and middle school. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
On the vote, Mr. Rendon?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mr. Perry?
Yeah.
And the chairman votes aye. And then the next article is to see if the town will raise and appropriate a transfer from available funds 105,000 to engineer and construct a secondary means of egress and renovate a portion of the public library. So Commissioner.
Correct.
Mr. Aguirre, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm sure by now you've heard that the library is closed. The fire chief and I will not allow it to reopen for several reasons. Most importantly, the spatial distancing requirements cannot be obtained because of the current library layout. There are other safety issues there, which also motivated the necessity to close it down to the public. So where we're at is a crossroad where we need to spend money on that building. And I say on the building because it's not just required for the library, it's also required if the town were to repurpose that building for anything else. We do not have a secondary means of egress. We do have a ramp, but the ramp, as you know, is on the front of the building. It's made out of wood. I think it's quite unsightly. It doesn't match the building, et cetera, et cetera. We also have inferior restroom facilities. I don't know how many of you have been in the building. It's basically a closet with a toilet in it. So what we decided with the selectmen's recommendations is, what do we need to do to get this building where we can reopen it to the public? So what we did was we determined a few things that need to be done. The two most expensive items are a permanent ramp, which would also act as a secondary means of egress, and a handicap compliant bathroom, which would take over Jocelyn's office. So it doesn't fit all the needs of the library. Certainly it actually, in some cases, further complicates them, but it does allow the building to be used in a safer manner, and allows the restroom facilities to come into the modern day standard. I yield.
So is there anyone wants to add anything to that? Any questions?
Jim, you talked about that this may or may not then stay as a library. Are we throwing money at a problem that's only going to get bigger?
So the reason I said that was that I don't know what the long-term plans for the library are, but what I do know is that we as the town are stewards to the Carnegie building. And I don't ever foresee that we will not use that building for something in the future. So I don't think this money will be wasted. I think it'll be money well spent. And in fact, if the library were to stay, it certainly gets them closer to compliance. If they were to leave, then it allows us the option to use it for something else.
Anything else, Pete?
No.
Robert? Kevin?
No, I don't have any other questions on it.
And that's a good point, Pete. I just, my fear and what the message that can't come out of this is, we're putting $100,000 to keep the library there for 50 years. This should not supersede the efforts that the trustees and others around town have in the interest of building a new library that's been talked about for many years in town. That this is a long-term goal of a building that will have some necessity as the town grows and continues to grow, that this is just another piece that's necessary to do in investing in our infrastructure of our buildings that we don't do enough of in general. So I appreciate the efforts and thank the commissioner for bringing the needs to the commissioner and the fire chief for taking the lead to address something that's needed in a building that will be a value to the town going forward, whether it's a library or not.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you.
Yeah, Mrs. Gulak?
When the Board of Selectmen initially discussed this proposal, the list was longer and the dollars were higher. And what we said to Mr. Aguirre and Chief McGee was, tell us absolutely positively the least amount of work we have to do to this building to get it open so that both of you will agree it can be opened. And this is what we came up with, because we also recognize we don't want to put a lot of money in it, because we do have, hopefully we're on a list, we're going to go for a new library. And the whole point was, we don't want to spend money that would be wasted. And this is exactly what Mr. Aguirre and the chief recommended, and the board supported.
Yeah, and I think this also shouts another need of how we can, and I know this one came up as part of the pandemic. There are needs we've known we needed, but to the building commissioner, I know you always have the foresight to look at these types of things. These are the things that need to be put on our, we have our physical 5-year capital plan that we want to talk about, but we also have our infrastructure and our building 5-year plans that we need to look at as we continue to upgrade our buildings, so we don't have unexpected at a fall town meeting that we want to spend, I mean, between the next two articles, $135,000 that, or actually almost $200,000 with the other project. Let's start to put a list of those things so we can pick them off year by year. And, we do have unexpected things that come up, but let's get the list back together on physical upgrades, not just equipment upgrades. Because we tend to always look at capital as equipment upgrades and not physical building upgrades.
So noted. We're working on that plan, and I appreciate you recognizing that. As you can presume, the list that we've had is quite long, because we have neglected our buildings for a very long time. So I'm trying to prioritize, and obviously the pandemic has brought this one to the forefront.
Yep. So appreciate that. So I would recommend that we transfer $105,000 from free cash for the purposes as listed in Article 8.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
On discussion? Mr. Rendon?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mr. Perry?
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. And then I think this one is also will be with our building commissioner, is to raise and appropriate a transfer from available funds $30,000 for engineering services to make ADA improvements to town hall or take action relative thereto. I would turn the floor back over to the building commissioner.
So, yes, I have some knowledge of this. What I did was I was tapped to discuss what some of the deficiencies are at town hall. And I know that our town administrator, former town administrator, was working with the ADA commissioner, I believe is his title, to work for grant funding. And from what I understand, some of those grants can't be accessed unless we have some of the background engineering work done. So in particular, the ramp in the front of town hall is non-compliant. It's been non-compliant since it was installed. There's no vertical access between the two levels, floor 1 to floor 2, which have shared services. And then there are some other internal problems, some of which are going to be addressed throughout this town hall renovation project. So I'm going to chip off as many as I can. But if there is grant funds available to get some of that stuff done, we certainly want to take advantage of that. So that this money is to get us in position to be able to apply for some of those. I yield.
Yeah. So my question to that is, would this not be part of our proposal on the town hall renovations that you mentioned? I just don't understand why, to me, as the building commissioner, as the keeper of the buildings, should be intimately involved in anything that has to do with improvements to a building. So who's driving the train on this $30,000?
Unfortunately, it wasn't me.
So can I ask them, that's a question to the Board of Selectmen, so.
Mr. Chairman, I believe this might be the ADA Commission, so Selectman Pacheco, did you want to chime in? I genuinely do not know about
Yes,
this article. Thank you, sir.
yeah, a year ago, we got a grant to evaluate all of our buildings to make sure, to see where we're not in compliant with ADA. And obviously, the town hall is not in compliant. We are eligible for grants for an elevator, for improving the ramp, but we can't do that without the engineering study. We had initially requested that we get a grant for the engineering, work, but we're not eligible for that. So in order for us to apply for the other grants, we need to have this study done so we can see what they require us to do and what needs to be done for our physical building. So we need that. It's $30,000. I get it. It's a little bit of money, but we need to make our buildings ADA compliant. We have a study of all of our buildings. The town hall is one of our more expensive buildings as far as ADA non-compliance, but we're seeking those, the engineering funds is $30,000. We're not eligible for grant for that, but once we get that, we think we're going to be able to get future grants.
Selectman Pacheco and Chairman Swartz, I just wanted to ask Selectman Pacheco a question.
Yep.
Because I don't think this point was made clear enough. So this is different than what the building commissioner is doing. He is making some office space on the lower level. He's doing some renovations downstairs. But this engineering study, as it's been explained to me, would open the door to things like a possible elevator, making the ramp more ADA compliant in the front of town hall and things like that, that are outside of the scope of the funds that were approved already for renovations at town hall. Is that correct?
That's correct. The funds that have already been approved, nothing to do with the ramp or the elevator. This is, in our building commissioner he's read the report. He's aware of what we're not in non-compliance as far as inside of the building, and he's rectifying those as he's renovating the inside. But the outside is, we need a study to, you got to have the ramp at a certain level. You got to have the brakes at a certain level. I know that it's supposed to be, I forget what the percentages of the ramp's supposed to be, but we're off. I was there when they did that particular study. People need to be able to get from the first floor to the second floor without having to climb a long ramp or have something like a lift or an elevator for them. And we are eligible for grants. Whether or not we're going to get the grants, that's not guaranteed. But we can't get those grants without doing the study and doing the engineering work.
I understand that, Mr. Pacheco, and I wholly support us being compliant with all ADA regulations. My only point right here is the building commissioner, my opinion, this is my own opinion, should be intimately involved in any of the determinations that we're making for ramps that access buildings or anything that is involved in the structure of the building. And if we're asking to continually spend money on the upgrades, and I'm not saying that we don't need them or that, one of my major questions is the building commissioner someone who's involved with the ADA committee, intimately involved as an ex officio or an advisor to the ADA committee, because he has the most expertise of anyone as it comes to the building's rules and regulations and access to those rules and regulations. I just don't want, we tend to put committees together and they go off on their own direction without coordination. Something like this, if we're going out and getting grants, the implementation of it will have to come back, and the building commissioner and or the highway department or someone has to be involved in it in order to implement it. So I think it should all be intertwined in some way. And that's why I asked the building commissioner for his input on this, but it sounds like he hasn't been involved in this.
Well, he's not going to do the engineering study, but I'm sure they're going to speak with him as to the layout of the building and all of that stuff. But to your initial question, the commissioner has been involved somewhat with the ADA commission. We are asking for a variance for the inside ramp for the old town hall, that the Commission on Disability is working on, but they're working on it with the commissioner, the building commissioner. So he's directly involved with it. We have a member of our commission as well, working with Jim on that variance. So I'm sure that Jim will be involved with this, as he's our facilities person for all of our buildings. I'm sure he's going to be involved in this, but he's not going to be the one that's going to design the ramp.
What committee controls the expenditure of this fund? Where does the expenditure, who is the person that signs off on the expenditure of this fund?
I believe it's going to be the Board of Selectmen. It's not going to be the commission.
I'm asking that question to the Board of Selectmen. Who signs off on the funds? Who has the approval of the funds?
Are you talking about once the money is approved?
Yep.
I believe it will be the Board of Selectmen. But Dr. See if you can correct me on that. I see Nancy's waving.
Yeah. So,
Mr. Schwartz, if I may, we have an ADA committee and we have our ADA coordinator. If this money is appropriated and it's for that study, since the building commissioner it's really not his, I'll say it's not his article, it's the committee that would be responsible, not the Board of Selectmen. Obviously, it'll be on the warrant. We sign the whole warrant, but the invoices or the control of the money, it would be the committee that put this article on here. I wasn't involved in this, so I think it's the ADA committee or coordinator.
All right, so is Jen Dukowski, I think I saw you were I believe you're on that committee?
Yes. So if I can
Sure.
clarify a little bit, the role of the Commission on Disabilities in the town of Dayton and in any town or city where they exist is to play an advisory role only. So we would not be in charge of this funding and how it is expended. It would fall to the Board of Selectmen. We advise the Board of Selectmen on what needs to be done, and then the Board of Selectmen can choose to take action there too. We don't actually take the action.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may
Yes.
I just add one thing?
Yes, sir.
As someone not intimately involved in the engineering services per se, but who appoints the members to the ADA Commission, I would actually feel more comfortable before I approves any funds. And I do agree that it should be the Board of Selectmen. I would feel more comfortable knowing that the ADA Commission had worked hand in glove with the building commissioner and that they together were recommending these particular changes, we'll say, to town hall. So that's my position on that.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Schwartz, yeah, I just wanted to comment on that. A couple of things. We've had our ADA commissioner a little bit longer than the actual commission has been in existence. I was appointed in August, I believe. We have 5 members serving. We've just started to review and approve our bylaws as a commission. So my understanding is that the building commissioner may have been provided with the KMA study, a copy of the study that was done, although we haven't had an opportunity to meet with him. We were talking today, we had a meeting just prior to this meeting about needing to meet with department heads. And certainly buildings are not the only thing that we will advise on. So yes, the commissioner should be involved with us going forward, but not on every item.
Okay. I have one other question. Where did the figure of $30,000 come from, and what is the scope of service for that $30,000?
Unfortunately, our town administrator is not here, and I believe she's the one that came up with that figure. I'm not sure if she spoke to the commissioner to get some assistance from him, but that was the figure. And she may have talked to the ADA coordinator also. I'm not sure about that.
All right, so sure.
Yeah,
Mr. Schwartz, I'm feeling a little awkward because I truly thought this was something that was under the control of the ADA commissioner and or the committee. If it is the Board of Selectmen, I've never seen this before. I don't know where these dollars came from. And certainly if it falls under the Board of Selectmen and we vote to do it and a contract's issued, then we're the signatories. But I was not aware of this article and I couldn't possibly explain anything, but if it's going to come to us eventually, obviously I would support it with my colleagues, but as I said, the explanation I gave you doesn't make sense now because I thought it was that
All
committee.
right, so instead of dragging it on, so if we can hold this one till next week to try and get some more information. I'm sure it's for the ramp and or elevator but can we just get a little more detail to it before we expend $30,000? I think we all agree that we need to do ADA upgrades to that building, and doing it as part of any kind of renovation at the time will, be beneficial in general. But let's just understand what that 30,000 gets us. Is that an engineering study on an elevator, an engineering study on the ramp, engineering study on changing the doors? Just what the scope of what we're getting for up to $30,000. So I'm sure the now former town administrator probably has some notes and left some notes on it. Let's see if we can just get that for next week.
Mr. Swartz, you're going to have a meeting before the town meeting like you
Yes.
always do?
Yes, we're
Okay.
probably going to have another Zoom meeting next week to go over the articles that once we have monies left. I'd like to not have to do one the same night as the special.
Okay.
I'd like to do it all and get it all done next week. So.
Okay, and maybe we could have Mr. Gale zoom in.
Okay. Is that, Mr. Pacheco, are you good with that?
Yes, I am, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions in the committee on that? Okay, Mr. Aguirre, did you have anything you'd like to add to that?
No, thank you. I think that was well said. That's exactly the way it should go. And yeah, I'll open up the dialogue. We have discussed meeting. I have read the report. There are deficiencies in just about every building. So yeah, we'll look forward to working with the commission in the future.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I'm checking out. Okay. Have a good
All
night.
right, I don't think there's any other ones. Thanks. All right, next is Article 10, to see if the town will reappropriate an amount of $40,000 from the special article, a Miller's Lane land taking and upgrades approved at the June town meeting a year ago, to be expended by the highway superintendent for sidewalk design and drainage upgrades on Main Street. So obviously our land takings didn't cost us as much as we had set aside.
Quite frankly, it's the most expensive land taking project we have ever had to date. Okay, the land taking alone for Miller's Lane was well over $60,000. And that includes all those bridge projects and other things we've had. So everything's been done on Miller's Lane. Everyone got paid. Everything has been recorded at the Registry of Deeds. There is money left in the original appropriation. And I think you know that Mr. Ferry is working on the redesign of and everything of Main Street, working with the water district because they're going to put in new lines. His plan is to have a sidewalk from William Street to County Street on the north side of Main Street. Obviously, this is going to take a few years, and obviously the water district is going to have to get their pipes in and all that. But the other thing I can tell you about Miller's Lane was there was some discussion initially on how much the town was going to have to put into this and whether or not we would have, chapter 90? I think it was 90. So anyhow, yes, the number was high. And as we started calculating costs and everything, we were a little nervous, but in the end, this money's available. So you're not raising and appropriating. We're asking you to vote to transfer it, or the people in town, transfer it to a new project, basically.
Yeah, and I think it's a very worthwhile project for anybody that's been on Main Street. So is there a motion to recommend the reappropriation of the special article?
Just have one question.
Sure, Mr. Perry.
So that money, the 40,000, is that going to cover the extent of the project?
Oh, no.
No.
No,
So this is
that,
just for the study and the design.
it won't even cover all of that, I don't believe.
All right. So
Yeah.
do we know how much more we're gonna be, or is there another article on here for the difference?
No, so from my knowledge of this project of my time serving on the water district, this is a very significant, like $1 million project, and this
Right.
is just a very, very small portion. So he can get started with some things that will help him in continuing the process. So it's a good spend of money we already have that we won't have to spend later on, but
Right.
it's probably a 3-year project once it finally gets started. So I'm sure once the water district finishes its portion of it and Superintendent Ferry finishes his, there'll be a comprehensive plan laid out, and that's what this is part of. But I think if we can finally get to that point where we have sidewalks from William Street to County Street, it's a significant upgrade to the town, so.
I can also tell you that Mr. Delano, the engineer who has done all of our surveying and drew all of our plans for all of our projects except 2, has been out there and has seen the scope of the work that needs to be done. The other thing to keep in mind is the project we just finished with Somerset Avenue, Pearl Street, and Center Street. We actually got grant money to pay for those sidewalks. So we are hoping under Complete Streets, because we will be putting in sidewalks and making this more walkable, and there'll probably be bike lane and all that good stuff. We'll be looking for grant money to help pay for this stuff too. So, but it's going to be expensive. I can tell you, when the county put the sewer line in, so if a sewer line is comparable to a water line, from 138 to the river was over $1 million, and that was a few years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're talking well over $1 million.
Yeah, I figured we were talking about a lot. That's why I asked. This seems only
Yeah.
like a very, very small piece.
Yeah,
Somebody said $1 million a mile, and that's like 2 miles. So I don't know if that's true, but
Yeah, who knows?
yeah,
All right, thank you.
I know from the water district standpoint, it's between $2 and $3 million. So
Okay.
trying to get some money from the state to help out.
Well, hopefully there'll be some.
Yeah. So, but all right. So is there a motion to vote for the reappropriation as listed in Article 10?
I'll motion it.
Is there a second?
Second.
On discussion? Mr. Perry,
Aye.
Mr. Roach,
Aye.
Mr. Rendon,
Aye.
and the chairman votes aye. Article 11, see if the town will raise an appropriate transfer from available funds a sum not to exceed $30,600 to purchase and letter a 2020 Ford Escape hybrid vehicle to be used for inspectional services. We talked about this in the spring, that we needed to add a vehicle, and I believe, if I remember correctly, we did receive a partial grant to pay for a small portion of this vehicle. I don't know if the Board of Selectmen can address that. I think it was like $5,000, if I'm correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we did receive a $5,000 grant award through the Mass EVIP program. It was not as much as the fire department had previously received for their inspectional vehicle, simply because the Ford Escape is a hybrid and not a completely electric vehicle. That vehicle does not exist yet. So really this vehicle should not be more than $25,600. So I don't know if the Finance Committee wants to take that into consideration. We did end up asking for the full amount just in case. We do understand that you are taking the levy limit and how close you are into consideration. But this vehicle would be used by both the building commissioner and the health agent, perhaps even the conservation agent, if that position is approved by the residents at the special town meeting on November 16th. So that is what the vehicle is for. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about it.
I would recommend that we transfer for free cash a sum not to exceed $30,000 for the purchase of the 2020 Ford Escape. And let's remember, we'll close it out at the end of the year after the purchase is made, and anything remaining will go back to that free cash that we're taking it out of now.
Did you say 30,000, Ed?
Yeah, 30,000.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
I'm having trouble hearing Ed.
Yeah, Ed,
Okay.
did you faded out there?
You
Yeah.
sounded a little far away, Mr. Chairman.
I haven't moved from my chair. You know what it
Okay,
is?
that's better. That's
You're
much
better now.
It must be the internet down here because I was on a Zoom call earlier today and they said I sounded like 3CPO and R2D2 all combined. So the motion was made and second on discussion. Mr. Rendon,
Aye.
Mr. Roach,
Aye.
Mr. Perry,
Aye.
and the chairman votes aye. Thank you. Next is Article 12, to see if the town will vote to raise an appropriate and or transfer from available funds not to exceed $14,000 to be expended by the Cable Commission to purchase and install recording equipment and related expenses in Old Town Hall. I would ask to the Board of Selectmen, I'm assuming this is to upgrade some of the equipment based on all of the visual Zoom type of meetings that we have to have in during this pandemic, and which I believe will continue far into the future. We have these meetings. So is this to upgrade the equipment that we just actually put in?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So actually, the town administrator had worked with the Cable Television Committee to make us sort of compliant in the pandemic era in terms of technology. So they helped install the TV and also the microphone so that we're able to have remote participation from residents. That was separate from this article. My understanding of Article 12 is that, so Mr. Chairman, you recall how we used to meet in the Board of Selectmen's meeting room at Town Hall. That was outfitted with certain technology that allowed us to stream live on Channel 9 as we were conducting our regular meetings. We are not able to do that in the old Town Hall meeting room. So now we're meeting there. We've relinquished our space in Town Hall. But that's why people haven't been able to watch us live at our regularly scheduled meetings. This $14,000 will allow us, will allow the Cable Television Committee to purchase and install the necessary equipment to make it so that any committee, commission, board, etc., that's meeting in the Old Town Hall meeting room will be able to be live on Channel 9.
Okay, I think it's a great investment because it not only allows us from a governmental standpoint to allow more access and more availability to do live programming, but I think it opens up to other town groups to be able to do live programming in a building that has a substantial room that will have video access, and you know, it may lead to more cable programming that we could have locally. So I think it's a wise investment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything from the committee?
No.
I would recommend we transfer 14,000 from free cash for the expended by the Cable Commission to purchase and install recording equipment in the Old Town Hall. Second.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, before you take your vote, I'd make a recommendation to the Finance Committee that $14,000 be transferred from the PEG Access Fund rather than from free cash.
Thank you, Mr. Laviolette. I was actually going to ask about that before they voted.
So, okay, was the article just not written correctly, or did PEG how much money do we have in the PEG account?
My recollection, it's somewhere in the vicinity of $50,000 right now.
So did the Cable Commission have plans that because they come to us every year with different transfers for different upgrades? Does the Board of Selectmen know if the Cable Commission had plans for that, and that's why it was requested this way?
I don't have any insight, Mr. Chairman, but if you want to move on to a different article, I'm happy to contact them and get that information for you.
That would be great, because if we can take it out of PEG, we'll take it out of PEG. That's what it's meant for. So
thank you. Just give me a few moments, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so we'll move on to Article 13. And I'm not sure, Mr. Rhines, are you still here? And
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman. How are you this
Okay.
evening?
good, good. And I think I saw Mr. Rosa earlier. Is he here also still, or did he leave?
I'm on my phone, so I honestly don't know if he's there or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, he was here earlier, but he must have left, so. Article 13 is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and transfer from available funds the amount not to exceed $92,041.43 for the purchase and installation of equipment for the North Dayton Playground project. So this is a significant investment request. So I'd like to get as much information as I can because I have some concerns about other opportunities for funding for this versus us taking it out of our free cash and or stabilizations. So. The
Correct.
floor is yours if you'd like to explain, Mr. Rhines.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. So what Mr. Rosa and I had done is we had gone out to bid through the state bid list, which only requires us to go to one vendor because they're on the state bid list. And we asked them to look at the North Dayton area behind the playground, the ball field, and it's 4,500 square feet. And they came back to us with two options. Option one was a total of $22,122.84 for the installation of apparatus and such. There was a design that was built with that. And option two came in at $188,787.55. Mr. Roser and I looked over the plans and decided that we were going to go with option two. So the reason for our request is that the list price of the equipment itself is $137,036. The installation fee is $34,500. The freight is $7,775.59. There's a rubber bonding surface, surface is required for this, so it's wheelchair accessible. And that bonding itself is $72,000, and that covers the 4,500 square feet. And it was optional for the company themselves, MRC Recreation, to do the stone, which is required under the surface, which is $15,750. So what we decided to do, and the reason why we're coming to look for these funds, is that if we purchase now at the list price of the equipment, which is the $137,036, we receive a discount because they're on a state bid list of $29,188.75. And on top of that, we also, because we're going to purchase early, receive, excuse me, just for a second, Mr. Chairman, a grant, excuse me, from MRC Corporation, which is a total of $23,581.41. So just alone, we thought, why we went forward, is that because of the discount itself and the grant, that comes to a total of, with the discount, is $52,770.16. So we thought it was in our best interest to see if we could do this now, to ask for these funds. So what we were going to do is that we were going to go back to the CPC and ask them for the $72,000 for the rubber bonding and the $15,750 for the stone that would go under the equipment. So the freight itself, with the list price and the discounts, that comes out to a total of the $92,000 that we're asking for. So we thought it was a good choice to do this, but we recently had a meeting and discussion with the Committee on Disabilities this afternoon. And right now, I believe Mr. Roser and I would prefer to just go forward with the article as written at town meeting, let the voters decide, and if it fails at town meeting, at the special, it gives us still that opportunity to work on this between then and the annual town meeting to see if we can go again to further grant access and other monies. So again, Mr. Schwartz, Mr. Chairman, we were going to ask the Park and Rec was going to ask the CPC for the rubber bonding, which is $72,000, and to ask them to pay also for the stone that's required under the surface. Now, there's excavation and prep site that's also included with this. Now, we could have our highway department do that, and they would work in conjunction, of course, with the contractor to get that done. So we're looking at some possible savings, and right now, again, I think that we at Park and Rec would rather see this just go to the people and let them decide. If there's a motion on the floor, there's a motion on the floor. If there's not, then again, there's not. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
I'm sorry, Mr. Schwartz.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just for a second, I'd like to ask you if you would contact me after the meeting via messaging and send me your email address.
I will text that to you as we speak.
Okay, and I can just forward the information to you at a later time. Right now, I'm not sitting in front of my computer; it's down, so I can get this to you at another time.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Mr. Ryan. Mr. Chairman, Zerg officers.
Thank you.
Brett, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just two things very quickly, Mr. Chairman. My first question for Mr. Rhines is, what is the Parks and Recreation Commission's official recommendation? Are you recommending, in terms of government officials appointed and elected, that we are not to make any motions?
No, I'm not. No, that's not, I don't know. No, you're no, not at all. What I'm saying is that as always, you show up as a resident of town meeting. If Park and Rec decides to make a motion on the floor that evening and the article is read as such, then so be it. If not, then that's how the process works. Either the article is read as a motion or there is no motion on the article when it comes up as the number.
My only concern, Mr. Rhines, is I think we all, agree and acknowledge that we need a playground in North Dayton, meaning all the us key stakeholders on the call tonight. I just fear that if a motion is read and it's not, for whatever reason it's defeated, that we may have trouble getting this passed at a future town meeting. And I want to make sure that this happens. That's my only concern, Mr. Rhines.
Can I speak, please?
Who's that?
Mr. Pacheco.
Sure, Mr. Pacheco, sorry.
Yes, so the Commission on Disability met with Parks and Recreation today, and the commission voted that they want this warrant to be tabled and that it be continued to the annual town meeting, and that the Parks and Recreation and the Commission on Disability work together to come up with a plan that is compliant with ADA, as well as looking at funding for grants and seeing what else is available. So the Commission on Disability is not supporting this at this time.
Selectman Pacheco?
Yes.
Can I ask you a question as an ADA Commission member?
Non-voting member, yes.
Yeah, yes, non-voting member. Was it the position of the ADA Commission to not have a motion with the understanding that at a future date when the ADA Commission...
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Parks and Recreation is excuse me, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
Parks and Recreation is an elected separate board from everyone else involved with this. We make our own decisions, not the Commission on Disabilities, if I may. We make our own decisions. We are a separate entity.
Understood.
Correct.
Thank you.
Understood.
Thank you, sir. I guess my question is for the two involved stakeholders, the two Parks and Recreation Commission and the ADA Commission separately. Since we all agree that we want to make this happen, or since you both agree that you want to make this happen, are we not going to have a motion in hopes that there's no discussion about it, or is there going to be an explanation that this will be continued at a future town meeting?
I think that is a question that's inappropriate because in a way, it's kind of inappropriate because
All right, so I'm gonna reel this back. I'm gonna reel this back into the finance committee. So did any of the committee members have a comment before I comment?
The one question that I have, the way the article's written, free cash or available funds, but I know that the report that we were sent was talking about the 92,000 coming out of community preservation also. Is that not the case?
What was that?
The
Summary says
92,000 coming out of
CPC.
CPC.
Sorry, if I may, Mr. Chairman, that was my best guess as to where the funding was going to come from. I put that worksheet together myself. I made a presumption that the CPC would be funding the entire project. If I'm incorrect, I apologize. It just sounded more like a CPC type project. Didn't even give any consideration to free cash being used for it. But I mean, where it is a Parks and Rec, and they're part of the town, you know, that they're a town department. There's certainly nothing inappropriate about using free cash for at least a portion of the project cost.
Right. Right.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Rhines.
Yeah, I've said this for quite a long time, but you know, there is also another caveat that's involved with this too. This is technically a capital outlay project. I do believe it falls under that category under the law. So maybe down the road, we could also tap that resource at a future date. Mr. Chairman, I know we did meet with the Commission on Disabilities this afternoon, and I put a motion this afternoon to the two of us to table the article going forward at town meeting. And there was no vote taken. Okay, and there was no vote taken. Mr. Gross did not second, so there was no vote. So I would assume that going forward, we are going to go to town meeting. We're going to put it on the floor. If there's a discussion, I think the point being is that this will be in the view in the eyes of the residents, so they'll be able to say, look, they've been working on this, and they've been working on this, so let's help them out if they go to town meeting in June and everything is all squared away. We could working with Commission on Disabilities and also through Parks and Recreation.
Yeah, totally understood, Mr. Rhines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Roach, do you have anything else?
I like Chris's thinking.
Okay. Mr. Pacheco, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I'm all set.
Okay. Mr. Rendon and Mr. Perry?
I think most of the questions were answered.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Tim, you're headed in the right direction on it. I think it's somewhat presumptive to see if we're going to, that a vote will actually get taken place on special. And I'm going to recommend that we at this point don't make any recommendation on this article. And because I think I'm along the lines with Mr. Roach, I'd like to see a continued, some more planning and discussion on an article such as this. And an expenditure such as this, my opinion, should be an annual town meeting article and not a special. Specials, as we have defined them for many years, have been items we've discussed in the spring that we couldn't afford, that we were waiting for special town meeting, special circumstance items that came up between annual and today, in cleanup articles. So I would feel more comfortable with an article such as this, or some more discussion done and something be presented at annual town meeting. Any other comments?
Procedural comment.
Mrs. Goulart.
I agree with what Mr. Rhines said as far as them being an elected committee, and I understand that the ADA commission or committee is an advisory committee. So strictly from a procedural standpoint, it's on the warrant. Somebody should make a motion and it should be seconded. So it's opened up for discussion. And then anybody present, including the ADA committee members or whoever, can get up and speak for or against. By the same token, if by the time we get to the article on town meeting floor, if somebody feels it should be tabled, they can make a motion, and if it's second, it would be tabled. But I certainly agree that at this point in time. It is here, and it should be, I would think it should be acted upon, discussed, no matter which way it's going to go, even if it's for a future thing down the road, so that people understand if they don't appropriate or approve this money, this project is still there and it's something viable that we would like to see done. So,
or the presenters of the article could withdraw it without any prejudice, so they can continue work on the project.
they can just make no motion at all.
That's another alternative.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Correct. There are many alternatives. I say, and I've always had this, let it come to the residents and let the residents decide. That's why we are a democracy, ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly. So, all right. Thank you for your time tonight, Mr. Rhines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, thank you very much. Mr. Pacheco, for your words. Mrs. Goulart, thank you very much. And good evening to all, and be safe, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Article 14, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate a transfer available funds in the amount of $8,000 for the Board of Assessors to be used. I can't read it, Brett, because your emails are in front of the screen. Thank you. In assistance for the fiscal year 2022 revaluation. As a motion to transfer $8,000 for free cash for the fiscal year 2022 revaluation.
So moved.
This is for commercial property. The power plant and an aquaria, if there's, I assume they're still there.
Yeah. As listed in the article. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I apologize again. Just a recommendation.
I need to get it, Mr. Levio. Let me get a second first.
Yeah.
Is there a second? Second on discussion. Now, Mr. Go ahead, Chris.
My recommendation would be to do this as a raise and appropriate. This is an annual operating expense. The revaluation now occurs on a rolling. It's no longer a triennial process or a biannual process. The assessors are constantly having to massage your property tax base and valuations and whatnot. This shouldn't even be an article anymore. This should be part of the regular operating budget.
So noted. Is there, do we want to hold that until we get our levy limit, or just do it as free cash for this one more year and request it be put into
this is not unusual. It's such a small dollar amount. I suppose it doesn't matter in either direction.
Yeah, understood. I just want the committee. I mean, based on the amount of free cash that we have for this one additional year, I think we've always done it, or I think we've done it both ways. I think some years we've done it out of free cash. Some years we've done it as a raise and appropriate as a special article. But what's the wishes of the committee on discussion? Peter, you have any thoughts? Your square turned yellow, so I could see you were thinking something.
That was just the dog chewing on this toy. Yeah, 6 or 1, half a dozen the other for this year, right?
Yeah. So, but I think, Chris, you make a good point that as we prepare next year's budget, that we start to insert a line item for revals. So I would motion is made and seconded to transfer from free cash. All's in favor, Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mr. Perry?
Aye.
Mr. Rendon?
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. Article 15 is, so we've spent very little of free cash. So the request to put an additional 100,000 in OPEB, I think, is not out of the question. I do have a question to the Board of Selectmen before we get into 15 and 16. Was there a reason, or I know the warrant's closed, why we didn't insert a article to put any money in our regular stabilization account? Mr. Zagrafsis, Mrs. Goulart, Mr. Pacheco?
Well, it was when we talked about free cash and we talked about articles. Initially, we had set some we, the Board of Selectmen, set priorities. And some of the first priorities were not some of these other things that are on here, but they were capital stabilization, OPEB. We wanted to have a decent amount left in free cash because at that time we still didn't know what it was. And those were supposed to be priorities ahead of time. Obviously, there's a lot of other stuff that came up here. And when you look at the dollars, if the free cash comes in at 1.5, and if we're looking at, what, is this 1.2? I mean, Ed, we always try to have 200,000 to 300,000 available in free cash. And this year, the Board of Selectmen really wanted to have more than that because we're worried about FY21 and we were hoping to have more in free cash. That's what we talked about. That's not really what's reflected on this warrant.
Okay. Yeah, we can always at a later date before the end of this fiscal year put some into stabilization if we so choose to, but
I will just mention also, we are probably going to have at least one other special town meeting. We've got 3 pilot agreements that we have in good shape. One is definitely not going to make the special that's coming up, and the other 2 have got to be reviewed by the developer. And so we may need a meeting for pilots, and we would have an opportunity to do something once we know what we have in free cash.
okay. It's 440. I'm just doing some quick math in my head.
Yeah, it'd be roughly 550 left if these next two pass.
And that, Peter, that's if we used free cash on everything up above, or if we use some of them to be raise and appropriate.
If we use free cash for what we've said, and including the number 9 that was held. So, well, yeah, I'm looking at 4, 5, 6 being raise and appropriate. Basically the rest being free cash.
So if those ended up having to be free cash, that's about another 100,000.
Right, so we'd be at about 450 then, based on the 1.5.
What did we put into OPEB in the spring? Does anyone know?
Was it 25,000?
No.
Oh, sorry, if I may, Mr. Chairman, it was 35,000 was the article amount.
Oh, I know it wasn't a lot.
OPEB, okay. All right. And then what is our current balance on capital stabilization?
Sorry, I passed it along. I think it's not, Peter can correct me, $925,000 is the current balance of the capital stabilization fund?
And we had taken some out of there, right, Peter?
As of the beginning of this year, yeah, 925, 589.
And because we had spent some, because that was over $1 million for a while, so. Okay, I would make a recommendation that we transfer from free cash $100,000 to OPEB. Is there a motion on that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
On discussion? Mr. Perry?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mr. Rendon? And the chairman votes aye. Last one is to see if we want to transfer 200,000 to the capital stabilization account. So that is probably a good number based on today. Peter, since you have it in front of you, what is what do we have in the regular stabilization account?
1447.
Okay. So, and you said 925. So I would recommend that we transfer 150 to capital stabilization to leave us a little bit more wiggle room. And then if and when we get the final certification, we can adjust that higher when we get to town meeting based on what the actual number is. We could make an adjustment to our recommendation next week if we wanted to, but let's start with 150 and then we can take it higher. So I would recommend the finance committee recommends a transfer of 150,000 to the capital stabilization account, getting it back closer to its 1.1 million. Is there a motion? So moved by Mr. Rendon. Is there a second?
Second.
On discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Rendon?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mr. Perry?
Aye.
And the chairman votes aye. I think that is the last of the financial articles, if I'm correct. My only other question is on Article 17. I know it's not a financial article, but it does affect the financial team in town. And I know this came up, oh, Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong, probably 6-7 years ago. Well, when did Mary become treasurer collector?
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah, about 6 or 7 years ago.
Oh, wait a minute. No.
No, it was longer.
2007.
Yeah, so shortly thereafter, this was brought up, and I know I've advocated to make this change for many years because it is a pivotal professional position that has many more duties than when it was created. And I think we are one of a minority of communities across the state that still has an elected treasurer collector. So I think it is a step in the right direction. And I'm not sure, I asked the committee if they'd like to go on record in support of, it's not a financial article, but just as a committee to be in support of the recommendation to change our treasurer collector's position from elected to appointed. So I throw
Mr.
that out to the
Chairman,
committee for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, before you do that, when we discussed this last night, this is actually going to be 3 articles. We've got to expand it. There will be, because the treasurer is one elected position and the collector is another elected position, it's possible 2 different people could hold those jobs. So we've got to vote to, if I get this right, we've got to make the, ask the voters to vote to make the treasurer an appointed position. That's one motion. Then the next one is to make the tax collector an appointed position. And the third one is to combine the 2 into one position. So that's what we figured out we had to do. And we sent it to town council for review.
Yeah, and I think my question tonight is to just that the finance committee go on record in support of the concept of moving to an appointed treasurer collector.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Mr. Perry.
So if that were to occur, what would happen with the current positions on who they're held by?
Oh, this wouldn't happen until she leaves office.
Yeah, this won't take effect until the current treasurer collector leaves office.
All right, so this is just going to be a placeholder for the future.
Correct.
So when he leaves office, we have the ability to appoint someone rather than it being elected.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
I agree with that.
Yeah, correct. Mr. Rendon or Mr. Roach?
Agree.
Mr.
Yeah,
Rendon?
I'm all in favor.
Yeah, so I would just ask that the finance committee go on record in support of the converting the treasurer collector to an appointed position. Simple as that. Not on an article, but just the concept. So
Right.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
On discussion? Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mr. Rendon?
Aye.
Mr. Perry?
Aye.
Thank you. I don't think there's any other ones.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman,
I
First,
think,
Chairman Zagrafis and Mrs. Goulat.
my apologies. I didn't mean to
Sure.
interrupt.
oh, no problem. No
The old
problem.
Zoom lag strikes again, Selectman Goulart. We have Article 18, which I know is not a specific expense article, but it does involve a financial element. So I didn't know if the finance committee wanted to weigh in on that. And then I did get a response to the Article 12 question. And yes, that those monies should be coming out of the PEG Access Fund.
Okay. So if we could just get that for our meeting next week, we'll make the recommendation on that one next week.
Mhm.
Just a note on that. Okay. Okay, so on Article 18, and I know there was some discussion last night by the Board of Selectmen. So I asked our committee, are you familiar with what the request is? To create a revolving account of which funds under Mass General Law, Section 53E, 1/2, create a revolving account for the purposes of purchases of cruisers, cruiser detail, cruiser maintenance, and the funds would come from fees attached to details when a cruiser is utilized at a detail. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong in those comments, but I think that's what the email you sent over to me today detailed out, is these are fees that we collect on each detail when there is a cruiser assigned to that detail.
That's correct. There's also just so that we make the distinction there too, Mr. Chairman. There are fees that we collect. Basically, it's just an administrative fee for doing the billing and the collecting on the private details. And then there is a fee. There is an additional fee for effectively cruiser rental. I don't know if it's the intent or the pleasure of the board or the finance committee effectively to combine both that administrative fee and the cruiser fee, and so that both fees are being credited to this new fund that you're proposing right now in this article.
So I listened to the discussion and I know there's some disagreement on the Board of Selectmen, but I looked at it and I asked Chris to provide to us today what that amount means. And it's about, what, $25,000 a year on a year where there are significant road projects and significant amount of details. So we're not talking about a significant amount of money taken out of the general fund. I have a couple of schools of thought on it. One being, it kind of sets a little bit of precedent when it comes to fees being put into a separate account. It's not unusual. We've done it before. There are other revolving accounts in town. That's one side of it. But the other side of it, as I look at the maintenance of that fleet that we have, we've made a commitment every year to purchase a new cruiser, and we've done that through general revenue. It will create a fund that gives us that opportunity when we hit 2 or 3 years down the road where either we are tight financially or something happens to a cruiser and we have like we had last year with the cruiser getting totaled, that we had to buy a second cruiser. We now have access to a fund that we've built for those situations to buy some additional equipment or do additional maintenance. So there is an argument on both sides of why it's a good idea. So I just asked for input from the committee on that. So Mr. Roach, Mr. Rendon, Mr. Perry.
So on the article on line C, it states the fees, charges, and other monies charged and received by the department, board, or committee in connection with the program. Does that indicate that you're saying it's only for details, but does that indicate other fees could then go into this account as well?
No, I think it's strictly defined by the revolving account statute. And Chris, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah. So section 53.5 of the general laws does not address specifically what fees you folks get to decide what fees will or won't go directly into that fund. Right. But no, the only fees that should go into this fund are the ones that are associated with the actual private details that are being worked by the police department. And right now there are only 2 fees that they're collecting in addition to the fee for the actual detail being worked. So no other fees can go into this revolving account, and they can't be used for anything other than what the intent of the fund is for, which is to either pay for maintenance or to pay for at least the partial cost of a new vehicle. I think the idea is that you can build up a fund balance here. I agree with Mr. Chairman, relative to the discussion as to whether we're taking money away from the general fund.
Right.
I will add an additional argument on the opposite side. It also may mean that you're not going to spend free cash anymore in the future on vehicles as well. So even though you're taking $25,000 away from the general fund, you're not spending $25,000 of free cash to replace a cruiser either.
Well, then maybe the article should be written in such a way that dictates that. And in addition to that, I'm not sure that I would be that comfortable with line C, because I think it leaves it wide open for other fees to be put in there if ever they were obtained in the future, because I don't think that defines it.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand or agree
Okay,
with your
so
statement
Article
there, Rhoda.
18, line C, the way
Yep.
it's written right there is fees. You're indicating there's only really 2 charges that the police department does, collect now or charge. And that would be the only thing going in there. But the way the article's written, it looks like it's open-ended. And if ever the police department was to assess new fees, let's say, and now it calculates 50,000 a year and not 25, you're now taking a larger amount out of the general fund.
Well, Kevin, I think what that allows us to do as a finance committee, though, is what Chris alluded to, which is to only appropriate from free cash those. It's very similar to what we do with the ambulance fund, right? So if the balance in that cruiser detail account, revolving account, is, let's say, $50,000 in 3 years, we may choose not to fund their cruiser and say, you have the cash, you pay for it yourself. If there's an accident next year and we've only collected or have 25,000 in the balance, we might say to them, use 20 of yours and use 20 from free cash. We have that flexibility to say, here's what we'll make available to you based upon what you have in your revolving account.
I'm clear on how it would work, Robert. That's not really my concern. And again, I'm not going to drag this out.
Well, I think, Kev, your concern is covered by the second part of C, which says the program, those fees have to be associated with the program or activity for which the fund is established, which is all about, it's only cruiser detail fees. And if we start getting more and more details and that revolving account starts growing, that's where we then say, as the finance committee, we'll be fiscally responsible and say, we're not going to fund your cruiser this year. You've got the money to do it all on your own.
Yeah,
I understand that. And listen, I don't want to drag this out. I just don't see on this article to where it defines that it's only for cruiser detail. I see it's going to be put as a credit into cruiser detail maintenance, but I don't see it stating that it's going to be derived only from that. But that's okay. Again, let it go on the floor, let it get voted. I'm just saying, I just feel that the way it's written, it leaves it a little open-ended.
So Chris, if you could just clear up for us, at the end of section C, where it says cruiser detail maintenance fees, that is an actual program, correct? Currently an actual program. That is the fee that we currently collect, right?
That is correct.
So Kevin, that's the detail that says the only fees that can go into this are those that are part of the cruiser detail maintenance fee.
Okay.
That's not the name of the fund.
Okay, I was reading it as it'll be.
That's why I thought so. That's why I asked that question.
Yeah, it's a little ambiguous. That's why.
Understood. Totally understood.
Right. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, if it's going to be restricted to that, then it does make sense.
So I'm going to turn the floor, unless Peter, do you have anything you want to add?
No.
I'm going to turn the floor over to Mrs. Gulak because I know she had some comments last night, and I'm sure she would like to share those with us.
What I mentioned last night was we instituted those charges for cruises many years ago because we found out that, quite frankly, we could do it. And we had old cruises parked in the parking lot that were like, old, but the lights still work. And we didn't want employees putting blue lights on personal vehicles. And it was a moneymaker, and all the towns do it. My concern is that, first of all, the money is coming in as it says. It's the chief who determines how that's spent. It may never reach 25,000 or 100,000. The chief doesn't have to spend it per se on a cruiser that I can see or on maintenance. I will point out to you that we have an excellent record of providing cruises. You guys know that. We've done it for years. And I don't see that ending. I will also state that what maintenance will be done. We have a maintenance department. It's in the highway department. And if that mechanic can't fix a vehicle, it's going to go out to a Ford dealership, or if it's under warranty, he wouldn't touch it anyhow because it's warranty. The other concern I have is that one of the things that we were asked to do, the 3 selectmen, was to come up with our 5-year plans. Well, my 2 colleagues have plans, but they have bond issues. They have big bond issue projects, both of them, sewer lines, new library. I have the fire department and the highway department. Both the fire department and the highway department have equipment needs. If there is going to be money available, what I'm saying is, let's take a look at what the highway department and the fire department need for equipment. We've also talked about a town-wide fuel depot. And I would think if we could get money set aside for that, those are the things we should be looking at, because history shows we take care of cruises for the police department. My other concern is that, yes, we have 2 accounts at the library, they're capped, and we have the primetime program, Council on Aging, that gets capped. We approve those every year. The ambulance money, that is strictly controlled by state law, and we follow it, and we, working with the chief, we determine how we're going to spend it, whether well, obviously we pay for labor and salaries and benefits out of it, but we've been able to do some other things, equipment out of that. But that account is extremely controlled. And obviously it has a lot of income because it gets insurance money or Medicare money or whoever pays bills for ambulance transport. I look at this and I say, if in fact this reaches $100,000, we have other needs in the town in other departments that we should be looking at, because we always make sure we take care of our police department. And certainly I don't see that changing, and I support that. But I've got to speak up for highway and fire, because they have needs on their 5-year list that are not bond issues. They are equipment issues. And I really think that if we have money available, we should spread it out and help some other departments.
Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Chairman Zagrafsis.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I understand the concerns raised by Selectman Goulart. I do support this. I know Town Administrator Aaronstein supported this as well. I think it could potentially save taxpayers money, especially in a rough fiscal year, which we may have coming up. We're not sure. We have a lot of we have a big black box ahead of us. So I'm going to support this. And those are my 2 cents for what they matter.
I would agree with Dr. Zagrafsis on this. And it's one of those that there is an argument to be made both ways, and no one questions the commitment of the group that sits here today as it comes to cruisers, but that may not be forever. And I think it's a program that we have the opportunity that doesn't take, if this was something that was $75,000, $100,000 a year that would come out of our general revenues, I'd be sitting here advocating absolutely not. But as we know, like we saw last year with that cruiser, that there are unforeseen circumstances, and our cruiser program is different than a capital purchase for the highway department and a truck and a sander and different than buying a new fire truck or large equipment for the fire department. Cruisers are ongoing 24/7 vehicles that we are forever consistently evolving and rotating and upgrading. And if we could try something different that may allow us to look at things in a different way and give us some flexibility at the end, I think it's a good program to try. I don't, you know, we could 3 years from now the next finance committee that's here and the next board of selectmen is here, go, why are we doing this? But I think it's an outside the box thought that may solve something in the long term. But let's be realistic. There are a lot of road project details today and a lot of details that we collect funds on. We get into an economic downturn that doesn't have all of these details, and we go from it's collecting $25,000 to it's collecting $10,000. So it's not like it's taking a significant money out of our cash flow. So, I mean, I see the arguments on both sides.
Mhm.
I'm going to ask that we hold off and don't make any determination until people get some time to think about it, and we'll talk about it again at our next meeting so it doesn't drag on for any longer. Because what I was hoping was going to be an hour has been 2 hours, and we still probably have another hour next week. So unless someone wants to make a motion on it, I will say that we leave this for further discussion at our meeting that we're going to have next week.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask one question?
Yes, Chairman Zuccarello.
Would it be possible maybe to get someone who could who's more intimate with this article that could speak to it, perhaps from the police department?
We will make that request from either, whether it be, I'm not sure if it's Detective Richards is the one that does the cruiser maintenance program, or the chief, or Sergeant Cronin, so I will make that request.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions of the committee?
Ed, I have one request.
Sure.
In the past, when we've had pilot agreements, I was on the finance committee when the first ones came up. I remember Mr. McKeon saying, is there a recommendation from the finance committee on the pilot agreements? And at the time you said, we don't have something like, we don't make a recommendation because it's not a financial article. There's a school of thought that says absolutely positively finance committee should be aware of what's happening. And this is not only from people I've dealt with, other selectmen, assessors. So what I just want you to know, the current 3 pilot agreements that we're talking about, 2 of which are on the warrant, but we may not be able to act on them that night. The first 2, which are on the warrant, total over a 20-year period, $501,000. So that's what you're going to be looking at. And the chairman of the Board of Assessors and I have revamped the payment schedule so that it is heavily front-end loaded for the first 15 years. The second one is over $700,000, and it's a 15-year pilot. It was submitted with the lowest payments in the beginning and the highest at the end. We're completely revamping that. And the lowest payments obviously will be in the last 5 years. And the point being, because we have these capital projects down the road, or we could be facing bond issues, we want to set a process in place that anyone coming in for pilots understands. Town of Dayton wants these front loaded. We want to get as much revenue as we can so that we can put it into whether it's capital or stabilization or whatever. So it's available to the town. So I think that once we get this back from the, I'll call them proponents or developers, the people who will actually own the panels, we will get copies after town council looks at it. Everything's okay. We will get this back to the finance committee to review because again, we have a new procedure based on the court case we won and Judge McGuire's ruling. The Board of Selectmen, Board of Assessors can agree to place these on the warrant. That doesn't commit the town of Dayton. It goes to town meeting vote. If they are voted favorably, then the Board of Selectmen, based on the judge's ruling, would execute and sign the pilots. And it will be the Board of Selectmen holding office at the time the vote is actually taken. So if it drags out, obviously the Board of Selectmen could change. But the feeling is FinCom needs to know what's going on, why this is happening, and the kind of money we're talking about.
Great.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Nancy. We'll we'll read through those, and I'm sure I'll have some questions that I can bring some more information back to the committee next week. And we'll certainly take a look at taking a stand on them and taking a.
Okay, but as I say, they're on the warrant, but the motion may not come up because if we don't have everything back from the proponents or the developer, I mean, they may not be happy with those front-end loaded agreements, but we stated that up front. That's how we were going to do it. So there may be a little more negotiation going on, but there will be a town meeting when we have to vote these, because that's the only way it's going to happen. So.
Okay. Okay. All right. Any other questions of the committee? Thank you all for your participation tonight. I'll send, is there any night that doesn't work for anybody next week?
Monday doesn't work.
Yeah, I prefer Wednesday or Thursday anyway, so.
Okay.
We got a board of selectmen Wednesday, don't we?
Yeah.
Wednesday night? Yeah.
For 2 hours.
Oh, that's
Okay.
right. It's a short one because I've got to leave. That's right. Thank you for reminding
All right,
me.
so we'll probably do next Thursday again, if that works for everybody. We'll do the same way. And we'll finalize our recommendations, and then we won't have, hopefully by then we'll have free cash certified. Chris, you think?
Yeah, Mallory exchanged emails with our representative at the Department of Revenue. He's supposed to be starting on the free cash, his review tomorrow. We could have it as early as Monday.
Okay. So she talked to Mr. Garfoyle today?
Actually, we're only exchanging emails. He's unavailable. He's not in the office.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, keep us updated.
Will do.
All right. So I'll post the
FinCom
next
members,
Thursday.
just to add question to the FinCom. You guys get emails from me all the time, DOR, MMA. Do you want me to keep sending those? Do you find them? You scan them and see if there's stuff there that's important to you?
Yep, that's fine. I
Okay.
appreciate it. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
So,
Okay.
Mr. Pacheco, did you have anything you wanted to say to us before we finish up?
Good night.
Mrs. Dukowski, because you've sat with us the whole night, you and Mr. Woods, you would be the only public input. Do either of you have anything you'd like to add?
I'd just like to say, well-run meeting, and thank you so much. I've learned a lot tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Woods, anything?
Thank you very much, Ed. No, I'm just trying to keep an eye on you, that's all.
Great to talk to you twice in one day, Woody.
All right. Have a good night.
Thanks. Chairman Zagrafsis, did you have anything?
Nope. Thank you all for a nice meeting. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
On discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, all those opposed?